At my sister's engagement, she slapped my 10-year-old daughter for spilling red drink on her dress. I watched it happen from 10 feet away, frozen between instinct and disbelief, in front of 200 people and under strings of fairy lights that suddenly felt like interrogation lamps. My daughter's cheek turned red before I even moved. And in that moment, something old inside me cracked. It wasn't just the slap. It was everything that came after. My name is Alexa Chung. I'm 36, a single mother, and I live in a narrow 2-bedroom house on the east side of Portland, Oregon. I create educational content for middle school students, mostly animated science explainers and visual storytelling workshops. I started doing that after my husband Evan died in a climbing accident 5 years ago. Back then, I was teaching full-time at a private school. But after he passed, I couldn't breathe in classrooms anymore, so I shifted everything online and started teaching from home. Quietly, just me and my daughter Mia. Mia turned 10 last spring. She's thoughtful, gentle, a little awkward in crowds, and the kind of child who notices when someone is pretending to smile. She draws constantly, on napkins, paper towels, school worksheets, even the backs of receipts when I forget to carry sketch pads. She still sleeps with the stuffed sloth Evan won for her at the county fair 2 months before the accident. I still keep the voicemail he left me the morning he slipped. I didn't know it was going to be the last time I heard his voice. I just thought he'd call back after the climb. My sister Caroline is 5 years younger than me. She was always the one with a plan, the one who sparkled in family rooms and school assemblies. After college, she built a fashion tech startup in Los Angeles called Verge Mode, focused on sustainable high-end capsule wardrobes. She grew it fast, went viral after a celebrity reposted her capsule guide, and soon she was on podcasts, panels, Forbes features. My parents couldn't have been prouder. They sent her screenshots every time she trended and printed out articles to frame on their hallway wall. I was never jealous, just quietly removed. After Evan died, I think my parents didn't know what to do with me. I went from being the eldest daughter with a teaching career to the woman who couldn't attend holidays because she didn't want her daughter around wine glasses and pity. Still, when I got the invitation to Caroline's engagement party, I hesitated. It was printed on thick paper with gold trimming, and it smelled faintly like bergamot. The glass-lined rooftop, formal attire, RSVP by Friday. There was no handwritten note, no can't wait to see you, or Mia would love the view. Just names, a date, a time, and coordinates. It felt more like a business transaction than an invitation. But Mia was twirling in her socks when I opened it. She asked if it was from Grandma, and when I told her it was from Aunt Caroline, she lit up. She asked if we could go. I wanted to say no. I wanted to crumple the thing and toss it in the recycling, but I didn't. I smiled and said yes. She picked out her favorite yellow dress, the one with sunflowers stitched along the hem. It had a small stain near the sleeve from when she dropped a cherry popsicle at the lake. But she said no one would notice. She practiced her grown-up smile in the mirror, the one where she tucks her chin and says thank you softly, like she's reading a script. I pressed her hair the night before, packed her sketchbook in my purse just in case she needed a break from adult conversation. I told myself we'd just go for an hour, say hi, leave before dessert. I didn't expect it to turn into the night everything split wide open. The glass-lined rooftop was every bit as dazzling as Caroline's Instagram made it look. Soft jazz, open bar, gold-rimmed glasses, and panoramic views of the downtown skyline just beginning to shimmer at twilight. People in designer suits and pastel gowns clustered in little groups, sipping and gossiping when we walked in. A few turned to glance, then quickly turned away again. I felt the familiar ache return, that subtle shift in the air that always followed me at family events, like I was a shadow that had wandered into someone else's spotlight. My parents found us near the champagne fountain. My mother, Dorothy, wore pale lilac and pearls, her smile as tight as the bun on her head. She leaned in and whispered, "Mia's dress is casual, dear. Maybe next time, something more refined." My father, Peter, barely made eye contact, just a nod and a glance at his watch, like he was already bored. I bit my tongue and focused on Mia, who was politely nodding along, holding a cup of red hibiscus punch in both hands. What happened next didn't feel real until much later. Mia shifted too fast. Someone bumped her shoulder. The punch spilled forward in one surreal arc and landed across the satin of Caroline's ivory gown. Everything stopped. Glasses paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. Caroline turned slowly, saw the stain, and didn't even blink before raising her hand. Her slap echoed across the rooftop. Mia didn't cry right away. She looked up, stunned, one hand still holding the crumpled plastic cup, the other slowly rising to touch her face. A red mark had already begun to form across her cheek. Her eyes welled, but what broke me wasn't the tears. It was the way her body folded inward, like she thought she had deserved it. I rushed forward and pulled her into my arms, shielding her from the crowd that had suddenly decided their cocktails were more interesting than a child being slapped. I turned to Caroline, my voice low and trembling, asking her what the hell she thought she was doing. She didn't answer. She was staring at her gown like it had been set on fire, like a child's accident was more horrifying than the act of hitting her. My mother was the first to speak. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice clipped, her posture as rigid as always. "You and that child don't belong here." I stood there holding Mia, her tears soaking into my blouse, and felt the chill in the room harden into something darker. My father motioned to one of the security staff. "Escort them out," he said, without looking at me. I remember the feel of the guard's hand hovering behind my back, the forced politeness in his voice, the shame rising like smoke around us as we walked past trays of untouched hors d'oeuvres and frozen stares. Outside, the evening air felt like a slap of its own. Mia was shaking. I wrapped my coat around her and held her close on the curb, trying to speak, but nothing I said sounded right. I wanted to say it wasn't her fault, that she did nothing wrong, but she was already somewhere far away, curled deep inside herself, and I couldn't reach her yet. We took a ride-share home. She didn't speak the entire ride, just held on to the corner of my sleeve like it was the only solid thing left. That night, she fell asleep on the couch with her stuffed sloth tucked under one arm, her other hand balled in a fist under her chin. I sat beside her for hours. I should have left that party the moment I saw my mother's face. I should have protected her from all of it. But I thought maybe things could be different this time. I thought showing up mattered. Now I knew better. My phone buzzed just after midnight. It was Ruthie, a friend from college I hadn't seen in person in almost a year. She'd been at the party covering the event for a lifestyle piece. She messaged. I saw what happened. I filmed it. I couldn't just stand there. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, and typed back. "Can you send it 30 seconds later?" The video landed in my inbox. I clicked play, hands trembling. It was short, barely 40 seconds. Mia smiling, the punch spilling, Caroline turning, the slap, the gasp, the silence, my scream, my mother's command, my father's indifference, security leading us out like we were thieves. I watched it twice, then a third time, on the fourth. I muted the sound and just studied their faces. Caroline's fury, my mother's contempt, my father's detachment. Not one person had stepped forward, not one voice had objected. They all saw, and they said nothing. The next morning, I sat Mia down at the kitchen table. I made her tea with honey, even though she never drank tea. She stared into the cup like it held answers. I told her none of what happened was her fault. I told her no one, no matter how upset, ever had the right to put hands on her. She didn't speak for a while. Then she looked up, her eyes swollen, and asked, "Will Aunt Caroline be mad forever?" I said I didn't know. She nodded, quietly, then asked, "Am I still part of our family?" The question knocked the wind out of me. I wrapped my arms around her and whispered that family is about how we protect each other, not just who shares a last name, and that whatever else happened, I was never letting her go through anything like that again. Later that afternoon, I called a legal helpline. The woman on the other end transferred me to a child advocacy lawyer named Felicia Tron. I explained what happened, kept my voice steady as I spoke through the details, every word tasting like metal. She asked if I had video evidence. I sent it while still on the call. She watched silently when it ended. Her voice was calm, precise. "We're filing a case," she said. "Physical assault on a minor. We'll also look into negligence and emotional endangerment from the adults involved." She didn't ask if I was ready. She just told me what needed to happen next. Felicia handled everything with the kind of clarity I hadn't realized I needed. She didn't flinch, didn't ask if I was sure, didn't tell me to calm down. She just listened, laid out next steps, and filed the report. By that evening, we had a court date scheduled, a formal case name, and a motion to file for a temporary restraining order against Caroline, my mother, and my father. I hadn't spoken to any of them since the night of the engagement party, and I wasn't planning to. I focused instead on Mia, on letting her be a child again, even if just for a moment. She drew quietly at the kitchen table while I filled out legal forms in the next room. She didn't ask many questions. She didn't have to. She knew something had shifted, not just outside, but inside me. I think she was waiting to see if it would last. Ruthie texted again the next morning. She asked if she could share the video publicly. I paused before answering. I didn't want to turn our pain into some viral outrage moment. I didn't want Mia's trauma to become content. But I watched the video again. Just to be sure, I saw my daughter, small and stunned, shrinking under the weight of adult cruelty. And I saw no one stop it. That silence was louder than the slap. I texted Ruthie back and said, "If you share it, share the truth. No edits, no music, no commentary, just what happened." She posted it that night, a 45-second clip, no captions, no voiceover, just the raw sound of laughter turning into gasps, of punch hitting satin, of skin on skin, of my voice cracking, of my parents calling for security. I didn't expect much, but by morning it had already been shared 60,000 times. By lunch, the hashtag #JusticeForMia was trending across platforms. Comments flooded in from strangers, from educators, from parents who had once stood in similar silence. They weren't just reacting to the slap. They were reacting to how normal everyone else made it look. The way nobody in that room had tried to stop Caroline. The way the family turned against the only person trying to protect a child. By evening, my inbox was full. Journalists, legal experts, advocacy groups, One message came from a parenting columnist I'd followed for years. She said, "You didn't just post a video. You posted proof of what too many people are taught to tolerate." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a condemnation. Either way, it was the truth. Mia watched the views rise with cautious curiosity. She didn't smile. She didn't seem proud. She just asked, "Do people believe us now?" And I told her, yes, they do. 2 days after the video went live, Caroline responded. Of course she did. She posted a carefully edited clip from what looked like a home office. Her hair was loose, her makeup subtly smudged, her voice soft and trembling. There was piano music playing faintly in the background. "I'm deeply sorry for how things appeared," she said. But there was a lot going on that night. I was under immense stress. I love my niece very much, and I would never intentionally hurt her. She never mentioned the slap, never said Mia's name. Instead, she implied that the clip had been taken out of context, that this was a personal family matter being weaponized by people with ulterior motives. She even hinted that I had encouraged Mia to act out for attention. I watched it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't feel rage, I felt exhausted. The gaslighting wasn't new, it was just louder now. But the internet wasn't buying it. Her comments section exploded. "You hit a child, and now you're crying for likes," one user wrote. "We saw the footage. We don't need your script." Within 48 hours, several of Caroline's brand sponsors had cut ties. A scheduled product drop was quietly canceled. Her follower count dropped by nearly 100,000. Public statements followed. "We do not condone violence, especially against children. This incident does not reflect the values of our brand." It was a slow collapse, like a stage set being disassembled behind her. She tried to turn the story around, but the story wasn't hers anymore. That night, Mia asked if we were in trouble. I told her no. I told her we were the ones telling the truth, and that mattered. She nodded and went back to her drawing. It was a picture of a girl holding a lightning bolt, her hair wild in the wind, her feet planted on clouds. I didn't ask what it meant. I just watched her color in the sky. The rain started quietly that evening, tapping against the kitchen window while Mia sat at the table with her colored pencils, and I stood over the sink, rinsing dishes that didn't really need washing. The house was quiet in the way only homes are when something has recently ruptured. Her pencils scratched softly across the page, her posture relaxed, but I knew she was still listening, still feeling. When the knock came at the door, I wasn't expecting anyone. I dried my hands and glanced through the peephole. I had to look twice. Gavin. He stood there with his shoulders slightly hunched, holding a folder under one arm, his coat damp at the shoulders and collar. His face didn't hold any of the smooth confidence I remembered from Caroline's posts. He looked tired in a way that couldn't be faked. I opened the door without a word. He nodded, hesitant, and I stepped back to let him in. He moved slowly into the center of the living room, glancing around like he hadn't expected the space to feel this normal, lived in, familiar in a way his world probably never required. I didn't offer tea. I didn't ask why he came. I waited. He was the one who broke the silence. "I saw the video," he said, voice low, words measured. "I've seen it several times. I kept thinking if I watched it enough, I'd find a way to justify what happened, but I can't." He looked me in the eyes for the first time since that night. I didn't stop her. I didn't say a word. I just froze. And I know that's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I stood across from him and said nothing, not because I didn't have thoughts, but because I knew his next words would tell me whether this visit was for him or for us. He took a breath, pulled out his phone, and tapped a few times before handing it to me. There's more you should see. On the screen were emails, messages between Caroline and her brand team, a PR strategy deck titled Engagement Content Rollout. There were contracts in negotiation for sponsorships tied to the engagement announcement, including a clothing line, a home decor company, and a wedding blog network. I skimmed through the list until I saw a highlighted note at the bottom of one document: potential angle, family redemption, sister contrast, if public incident occurs, shift narrative, secure optics control. I looked up at him, and he just nodded. She didn't just plan a wedding, she planned a campaign. She had a prenup drawn up that locked in brand equity and residuals based on shared wedding content. None of it had anything to do with me. Really, I was a name on a contract and a photo opportunity. The moment the video went viral, she panicked, not because of what happened to your daughter, but because it threw off her storyline. I handed his phone back slowly. What did you do about it? I asked, even though part of me already knew. He nodded again. I ended it this morning. I told her. I told your parents. I've canceled the brand deals and asked legal to formally terminate our engagement agreements. I should have done it sooner, but I didn't know what I was looking at until I saw it through your daughter's eyes. Just then, Mia walked into the room with a new drawing in her hands. It was a picture of a small fox in a metal helmet, standing between two shadows and holding a shield over a nest of baby birds. She paused when she saw Gavin, but didn't look away. He crouched down to her level and said softly, "I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't speak up when I should have. You were brave, and what your aunt did was wrong." Mia stared at him for a second, then quietly held out the picture. He took it gently, as if it might tear from his touch. After he left, I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than necessary, letting the quiet settle. I wasn't grateful, not in the way people think. What I felt was something different, not closure, but confirmation. Someone finally saw it for what it was. Not a misunderstanding, not a dramatic moment at a party, a truth that had been ignored for years, brought into focus by the smallest hands in the room. The next morning, I opened my inbox to find an email from my mother. It was brief, almost corporate. Private family resolution meeting scheduled. Attendance expected. There were no apologies, no questions, no recognition of what had actually happened. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then forwarded it to Felicia without typing a word. Her response came quickly. "If you go, don't go alone," I typed back. "I won't." The meeting was held in a private office suite in downtown Beverly Hills, on the 17th floor of a building with tinted windows and white leather chairs that smelled like wealth and indifference. I arrived 10 minutes early. Felicia was already there, calm as always, reviewing documents with quiet focus. She looked up when I entered and gave me a simple nod. No pep talk, no false comfort, just presence. I didn't bring Mia. She was with Eleanor, my late husband's mother, who had stepped in without question the moment she heard what had happened. It wasn't a court hearing, not yet, but it felt heavier than any courtroom. This wasn't about legality. It was about legacy, and what I was willing to let go of for the sake of peace. Caroline arrived first, sunglasses on indoors, her hair pulled into a tight bun, posture straight as if she were walking into a photo shoot instead of a confrontation. She didn't look at me. My mother followed, wearing a pressed cream blouse and a face that pretended concern but didn't quite hide the contempt in her eyes. My father entered last, phone in hand, barely glancing up before sitting down with a sigh, as if this were just another errand to get through. We sat around a polished table with a small tray of untouched bottled water at the center, and for a long moment, no one spoke. It was Caroline who broke the silence. "You've embarrassed this family beyond belief," she said, her voice as rehearsed as one of her brand videos. "You allowed a child's mistake to become a weapon, and now we're all suffering because of it." I didn't react. She turned toward me. "You let your daughter upload that video. You let it go viral. You let people believe the worst about us." I took a breath and kept my voice steady. "I didn't let anyone believe anything. They saw what happened. You slapped a child, on camera, at your engagement party. You weren't edited. You were exposed." My mother shifted in her seat and chimed in with a weary sigh. "Alexa, this could have been handled privately, like adults. You didn't have to drag the entire family through the mud." I looked at her and asked quietly, "By privately, do you mean quietly? Like we've always done? Like when I married Evan and you acted like I'd vanished? Like when you pretended Mia was just a phase I'd eventually regret?" My father finally spoke, still not looking directly at me. "You've always been dramatic. That word, I'd heard it my whole life. It was their way of saying I was too loud, too emotional, too unwilling to let disrespect slide by quietly." I leaned forward, not to intimidate, but so they couldn't pretend not to hear me. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped covering for it. That was when the door opened again. Gavin walked in, wearing a dark jacket, holding a folder under one arm. Everyone turned. Caroline's mouth opened slightly, caught off guard for the first time since I'd entered. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Gavin didn't sit. He stood behind my chair and placed the folder on the table. "I've heard enough," he said. "Jessica, you used me. You used your niece. You tried to twist the story so you could keep your image intact. But I've seen the footage. I've seen the emails. I've terminated all joint projects, withdrawn our engagement announcement, and canceled brand contracts. And as of this morning, the wedding is officially off." My mother opened her mouth, but Gavin didn't wait. "This isn't a PR problem. This is a values problem. And I refuse to build a future tied to people who can hurt a child and then defend it." He looked at me then, and for the first time, not with pity, but with respect. He gave a small nod and walked out without another word. Caroline sat frozen. My father cleared his throat like he was preparing to smooth things over, but nothing came out. I stood, collected my bag, and paused at the door. Caroline's voice rose behind me, tight and breaking. "You always wanted this, didn't you? You wanted to ruin me." I turned and met her eyes for the first time since the rooftop. "No," I said. "I wanted you to love us. But since that was too much, at least now we're free." Mia was waiting in the next room, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Eleanor, gently pressing colored stickers into a scrapbook. When she saw me come through the door, she didn't ask anything. She just stood up and wrapped her arms around my waist, her head resting lightly against my ribs like she could sense the weight had shifted. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes full of calm understanding. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. I nodded, and for the first time in weeks, I actually meant it. The meeting hadn't just closed a chapter. It had ended a pattern, one I had been living inside since long before Mia was born. For the first time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone my silence, and that, by itself, was a kind of freedom. The following day, I woke up earlier than usual. Mia was still asleep, curled under her fox-patterned blanket, her cheeks soft against her pillow, the tension finally gone from her jaw. I moved quietly through the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the small table in the corner that doubled as my workspace. My inbox was filled with messages I hadn't opened. Some from journalists still following the story, others from women I didn't know, sharing stories that sounded painfully familiar. I read a few, answered none, not because I didn't care, but because I needed to breathe in this silence before deciding what to do next. The freelance projects I had lined up were enough to cover bills, but something had shifted in me. Not just a need for financial stability, but a deeper pull towards something of my own. I stared at the wall, at the rows of Mia's framed drawings, and the corkboard filled with sticky notes from our school project days. One of them read, "Art is what feelings look like when they don't want to hide." Mia had written it after a rough day at school last spring. I had pinned it there because I knew she believed it. That morning, I decided maybe I did too. By the end of the week, I had a name, a logo, and a mission, Z plus E Studio, a quiet little online shop with art prints, hand-drawn affirmation cards, and downloadable activity kits designed for children who didn't always fit in at the dinner table. I worked slowly, carefully. Every product designed not to sell a trend, but to create small spaces of safety. Mia helped with the packaging. She designed 3 fox stickers that became part of our first launch. She asked if other kids might like them, and I told her I thought they'd love them. The first few sales came from people I knew. Then a parenting blog reposted one of our illustrations. Then an autism support group linked to our downloadables. Within a month, we had over 10,000 followers and enough orders to make me reorganize the living room into a part-time fulfillment space. Ruthie came by with coffee and a pack of recycled envelopes and said, "I think you're building something real here. Alexa, not just a business, but a bridge." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and smiled. Caroline tried to post again, a carefully edited video of her holding a journal, speaking softly about how everyone makes mistakes and family drama is never black and white. She never used Mia's name. She never acknowledged what had happened. The comments section didn't spare her. People had seen too much, and no amount of aesthetic lighting or wistful piano could undo what had been recorded without filters. Her follower count continued to drop. Sponsors stayed silent, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to watch. My parents stayed away, maybe because of the restraining order, maybe because they understood. In whatever quiet way people like them understand, that the door had shut for good. I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them. That was a realization I didn't expect to come with peace. One night, while packing an order late into the evening, Mia looked up from her sketchbook and asked, "Is this what normal feels like?" I thought about it for a moment, then said, "Not just normal. This is what safe feels like." She leaned against me and whispered, "I like it here." It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when the phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, and for a moment I let it buzz unanswered. But something in me, maybe curiosity or just instinct, told me to pick it up. I pressed the screen and lifted the phone to my ear without saying anything. A familiar voice came through, low and hesitant. "Alexa," my father said. "It's me." I didn't respond. I just waited, the way I had waited so many times before, hoping the words would finally sound different. He cleared his throat, like he always did when he wasn't sure how to begin. "I'm not good at this," he said. "Never have been. but I saw what happened in that meeting, and I heard what you said, and I realized I should have said something a long time ago. There was a pause on the line, one of those long, weighty silences that feel heavier than any argument. I closed my eyes and let it sit there. "We hurt you," he said. The words quiet but clear. "Not just now. For years." And I let it happen. I let your mother run the script. I let Caroline be the one we protected. And I looked away when it was you. He stopped again. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to hear that at least once." Another pause. This one I broke. "Thank you," I said, my voice calm, "but I'm not carrying this anymore." He exhaled, and then he hung up. No pleading, no excuses, just the click of the line going silent, like a door closing behind him, gentle but final. I sat there for a moment, staring out the window at the bare branches swaying gently in the early autumn breeze. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant, just steady, like a storm had passed, and I'd managed to stay upright. Later that night, after Mia had fallen asleep under a pile of mismatched blankets, I pulled out an old photo album from the back of the closet. The cover was faded, the corners bent from years of being handled and forgotten. I hadn't opened it in a long time. Inside were photos from birthdays, family trips, graduations. But most of the pictures centered on Caroline, her dance recitals, her birthday cakes, her first car, in one Christmas photo. I was barely visible, half blocked by the tree, smiling politely from the edge of the frame. Mia sat beside me on the couch and pointed to that one. "Why weren't you in more pictures?" she asked. I looked at the image for a while before answering. "Because they didn't really see me," I said. "Not the way I needed them to." She was quiet for a moment, then closed the album gently and looked up at me. "I see you," she said. That was it. No long speech, no dramatic music swelling in the background, just those 3 words, soft and honest. I hugged her tightly and let the tears come. Not because I was sad or angry, but because I was finally free. The next morning, I packed the album back into a cardboard box and slid it into the corner of the closet, not out of resentment, but simply to make space for something new. 2 weeks later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a trip, not for work, not for obligation, just for Mia and me, Sedona, Arizona. I had always dreamed of going, but there had always been a reason to cancel. Work, family, guilt. This time, I didn't ask anyone's permission. We stayed in a cedar cabin tucked just beneath the cliffs, far from the noise of everything we'd walked away from during the day. Mia hiked with her sketch pad, collecting stones and tracing shapes in the clouds. At night, we wrapped ourselves in thick blankets and watched the stars emerge one by one like tiny promises. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and turned the red rocks into gold, Mia leaned against my arm and asked, "Do you think they miss us?" I knew what she meant, but I took my time before answering. "Maybe," I said, "but missing someone doesn't mean they were good to you." She nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Then she whispered, "Will we see them again?" I took a deep breath. "Maybe," I said truthfully, "but not if we have to be small to fit into their world." She looked out over the cliffs for a while, then said, "I like our world better." When we returned from Sedona, something had shifted for good, not in the loud, dramatic way that movies portray transformation, but in the quiet way you notice a door that used to creak now opens smoothly, or a bruise that once ached just fades into skin. We unpacked our bags and washed the red dust from our shoes. But the peace of that desert stayed with us like sunlight that hadn't fully let go. Mia was quieter than usual, but it wasn't the silence of worry anymore. It was the calm that comes from feeling safe without having to explain why. I reopened our little studio with a fresh set of ideas and a steadier heart. Mia sat beside me most afternoons, her hair tied in a loose braid, sketching characters that looked like tiny protectors. She said they were guardians for kids like her, the kind who notice everything but are too polite to interrupt. I took her drawings and turned them into prints and sticker sets, each one carrying a caption she helped write. One said, "It's okay to speak up, even if your voice shakes." Another read, "Family isn't who tells you to hush, it's who asks if you're okay." Orders picked up steadily, not explosive, not viral, just consistent. One mother wrote to us saying her daughter had never spoken in class until she brought one of Mia's cards in her lunchbox. Another woman said she used our fox stickers to start a conversation with her niece after a messy divorce. We didn't just sell art. We gave language to kids and parents who had never been taught how to say, "That hurt me." And slowly, the noise from Caroline's world began to fade. Her followers trickled away. Her brand dissolved quietly into half-hearted posts and thin apologies. She posted a story once, vaguely referencing healing in Seton. My mother sent one more email, asking if we would come for the holidays. There was no apology in her words, only obligation dressed up as tradition. I didn't reply. I didn't feel the need to explain anymore. Silence had always been her language. I simply returned it, but this time not from fear, just clarity. The gift in all of this wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. Though part of me still believes the court date, when it arrives, will matter. The gift was space, a wide, clean stretch of days where I didn't feel the need to prove I belonged anywhere I wasn't welcomed with both arms. Ruthie visited often. She brought groceries some weeks. Other times, just a box of tea and a story from whatever story she was writing next. She never pried, never asked me to explain anything that didn't want to be spoken aloud. We sat on the floor and packed envelopes with prints and stickers, our backs leaning against the couch like college roommates again. "You didn't just reclaim your voice," she said one evening. "You made room for other people to find theirs." I looked at Mia, curled up nearby with her fox notebook, and nodded. I wasn't trying to be brave. I just got tired of pretending everything was fine. One night, Mia asked if she could design a new set of cards, this time for teachers. She said maybe if someone had handed her a card that said, "Please ask me what happened," things might have gone differently. I helped her format them, but the words were all hers. We released the series quietly on a Monday. By Friday, 2 school districts had placed bulk orders. I cried for the first time in weeks that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I knew we had finally turned pain into something people could hold in their hands and understand. And still, the best moments weren't the sales or the reposts or even the messages from strangers. They were the quiet ones, Mia humming while folding tissue paper, the sound of our printer at night, echoing in a home that no longer felt haunted, the way she reached for my hand without looking when we crossed streets, the way she no longer looked over her shoulder when laughter erupted in a crowded place. One evening, as we closed up shop for the night and turned off the lights, she looked at me and said, "Do you think everything had to happen this way for us to find this?" I didn't answer right away. I just turned the lock, kissed the top of her head, and said, "All I know is I'm glad we're here." Spring came slower that year, like it had been holding its breath. The trees outside our window bloomed in soft hesitation, pale green buds pushing through branches that had spent too long in silence. Mia started walking home from school on her own again, just 4 blocks, but enough to remind her what independence felt like without fear pressing against her chest. She still looked both ways 3 times, still walked with her hand near her backpack zipper, like she was holding a secret she had earned. I watched from the window most days, not to check, but because watching her move freely was something I didn't take for granted anymore. The court date was quiet. No cameras, no crowds, just statements, facts, evidence, and the stillness that comes when a story has already unfolded and the room is only there to give it a name. Felicia spoke clearly, confidently. Caroline didn't say much. My mother looked away when the footage was played again. My father kept his eyes on the table. The judge ruled in our favor, citing physical harm, emotional endangerment, and parental negligence. There were fines, restrictions, mandatory sessions, but none of that was what stayed with me. What stayed was the moment afterward, when Mia squeezed my hand and said, "We're done now, right?" And I said yes, knowing we finally were. Plus E Studio grew slowly but meaningfully. We added a weekly series called Small Brave Things, where Mia and I wrote short stories and drew illustrations about moments that didn't look big on the outside but meant everything when you were in them. A child asking for space, a mother saying no without guilt, a teacher noticing the quiet kid. Parents wrote in, asking if we could make classroom sets. A therapist asked if she could use them in group work. We didn't set out to start a movement. We just told the truth and let people come to it in their own way. One afternoon, Ruthie invited us to speak at a community panel on digital storytelling. I almost said no. I wasn't interested in sharing the pain again. But Mia wanted to go, she said. It's not about the slap anymore. It's about what we did after. So we went. She sat on stage with her legs swinging over the edge, hands in her lap, voice steady when asked what she learned from all of it, that adults don't always get it right, she said. But kids notice when they try. There was a pause in the room that didn't come from discomfort, but from the kind of truth people feel in their ribs before they process it in their minds. After the event, someone approached me in the parking lot, a woman maybe in her late 50s, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they'd carried decades of watching people get away with things. She didn't introduce herself. She just said, "I wish my mother had been like you." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. That night, when Mia was asleep, I sat on the porch alone and watched the wind move through the trees. For once, I didn't replay old scenes. I didn't think about what I should have done differently. I just sat in the knowing that I had done something right. Not perfect, not easy, but right. Weeks later, while folding laundry, I found the envelope again. The original invitation to Caroline's engagement. It had been wedged between 2 recipe books on the shelf, its gold trim still sharp. I stared at it for a long moment before dropping it into the recycling bin without ceremony. It didn't hurt anymore. It didn't even sting. It just felt like paper. Mia turned 11 in April. We didn't throw a big party, just a picnic in the park with 3 close friends, a lemon cake she helped bake, and a stack of handmade cards that made her laugh out loud. Before bed that night, she hugged me tight and said, "This year felt like 5 years." I told her I knew what she meant. Sometimes. Healing doesn't look like celebration. It looks like sleeping through the night, like choosing not to answer a message, like taking your time in the cereal aisle because you don't feel rushed anymore, like knowing that even if they never say sorry, you still get to move on. As I tucked Mia in that night and turned off the lamp beside her bed, she whispered, "Do you think telling the truth changed anything for them?" I didn't rush to answer. I stood there for a second, the weight of her question lingering in the dark. Then I said, "Maybe not for them, but it changed everything for us." And maybe that's the real question. When the truth finally sets you free, what kind of life will you choose to build with it?